Five Nights at Freddy's. These 4 words have swept themselves into the internet hive mind in an incredibly short period of time. The first game released less than a year ago. As crazy as that is to believe, it's true. Maybe! Yeah, that's actually true. Over the course of 4 brilliantly made indie horror point-and-clicks, Scott Cawthon has clearly struck gold. But how did he do this? How could such a seemingly simple game take over the internet? The answer isn't so simple, but I have a few ideas in mind. Five Nights isn't just breaking records in sales, but also in views. From PewDiePie to Markiplier to smaller YouTubers who focus solely on FNAF, the YouTube gamosphere has been completely engulfed in a Five Nights frenzy. YouTubers are clearly a huge part of the Five Nights engine, pushing the hype train along video after video. But FNAF isn't the first game to do this, not by a long shot. It's just the latest and biggest hit in a long string of viral horror games. Probably starting with Slender, horror has long been a very let's playable genre. Yeah, I'm copywriting that shit. There's just something about watching a grown man piss himself that appeals to the devil inside of us. And Five Nights has produced buckets and buckets of piss. So Five Nights at Freddy's is the perfect game for let's plays. But it has to offer more than that to get this big, doesn't it? Well, yeah. And that comes in the form of the most confusing and ambiguous backstory to a game that I've ever seen. It puts Game of Thrones to shame, and before you call bullshit, I would know. I did a video on that too. In Game of Thrones, you at least know what the hell is happening. There is seriously a debate going on right now on whether Five Nights 4 takes place in 1983 or 1987. We can't even agree on the year. It's 1987. For all my years on the internet, I've never seen this sort of all-encompassing cultural phenomenon mystery hunt that's only now been solved by a video we made last week. I'm only half joking. That video's pretty good, just saying. No matter how you feel about the FNAF series, you have to admit that Scott Cawthon has created super deep, crazy lore and caused the biggest hunt for the truth since JFK's assassination. For you kids out there, that guy used to be president. That's a decent enough segue to talk about the mastermind behind it all, Scott Cawthon. This mystery genius is a huge part of Five Nights' success. Yeah, there's the obvious, he made the games, but there's also the fact that he's worked at an absurdly fast pace to produce these things. Anyone who knows anything about game development can tell you that even a relatively simple game like Five Nights at Freddy's takes many hours of development, art design, storyboarding, sound design, and more to create. Scott releasing 4 of these games in less than a year is up there with George Plank in his hour-and-a-half plank hold. You don't know what a plank is? Okay, moving on. Scott's work ethic is impressive, but it's also impressively greedy, isn't it? That's what I thought at first. And then I read that Scott donated $250,000 to the St. Jude's Children's Hospital. That's not greedy. But there's more to Scott's story. He's not new to making games. In fact, he's been doing it since he was a teenager. Scott spent much of his working life creating Christian games, which, despite good reviews, were all financial failures. Eventually, he fell into a deep depression and stopped making games altogether. Later, his insurance company caught wind that Scott had mentioned suicidal thoughts to his doctor, so they canceled his life insurance policy. In one of the most poetic real-life scenes I've ever heard, Scott realized that not only did his life have no value, but neither did his death. There, empty, Scott felt himself called back to making games. But this time, instead of Christian games, he had a great idea for a horror game, Five Nights at Freddy's. Crazy, right? But there's another reason for Five Nights' popularity. One of Scott's earlier games, Chipper & Sons Lumber Co., was destroyed by game critics who called it unintentionally terrifying and the characters soulless and creepy. In an interview with IGM, Scott said, "I was heartbroken and was ready to give up on game making. Then, one night, something just snapped in me, and I thought to myself, I bet I can make something a lot scarier than that." And that's how Five Nights at Freddy's was born and became the behemoth it is today. It's a story of perseverance, of doing what you love for its own sake, of taking your failures and using them as opportunities to grow and get better and discover strengths you never knew you had, of using the unique power of the internet to create a wildfire that can't be put out. And that's the truth. Maybe. Or is it? You decide! Last time, I asked if you believe my arguments for why Super Smash Bros. Will never be a major esport. I think some of you didn't catch that I was trying to point out ways to increase Smash's chances to make it as a major, but you know what? No big deal. Whatever. I'm not upset, it's fine. According to the numbers, 45% of you were convinced, 31% didn't really care, and 24% thought I was some sort of moron. That's better than expected! This time, I've got a simple one for you. What do you think of Five Nights at Freddy's? Do you maybe like Five Nights? Or do you maybe wish this craze would finally fade away? Click one, and maybe we'll influence Scott's decision on whether to continue the franchise. You never know.